Now that the NBA trade deadline is passed and the Chicago Bulls did not make another trade, we're going to be talking about if AK and this front office has the Chicago Bulls moving in the right direction and what we can expect from this team as they finish out the last half of the season. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you have found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today, now that the dust is settled, we're going to be looking at what direction this team is really headed into, and we're also going to be looking at what to expect from the Chicago Bulls. What should they be doing in this last portion of the season? And so before we jump into that, wanted to let you know that about 65.1% of you that watch are not subscribed to the channel. So make sure that you go ahead and you slam dunk on that subscribe button, as it means a lot as we try to reach our end of the season subscriber goal. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this content for today. And we are talking about the Chicago Bulls, the front office, and this direction that we might be headed in. And let's start there. And so, look, it was a tough presser to look at from AK yesterday. I don't think that there's any other way to really say it. I mean, if you got a chance to kind of look at that, I think as a Chicago Bulls fan, you maybe walk away a little bit more confused than anything. And so let's go ahead and just start with, I think, the positives and what was accomplished, even though we didn't see another trade made at the trade deadline. And so I think we have to give AK some credit here in the sense that he did shed a little bit of salary there in moving off of Zach LaVine. And so he did do that. And now you're in a situation where maybe the next big contract to come is maybe Josh Giddey. We'll see what happens in the summer. But so far, you have to give AK some credit there because he did go ahead and get off of Zach LaVine's money. Now, next up, we want to look at the fact that he did get control back of his picks. And so by doing so, I think now what you can do is you can focus a bit more, hopefully, in player development, and you're not necessarily worrying about the wins and losses and things like that because you have control of your picks. You can move on from there. And I'm not suggesting this, but if the Chicago Bulls wanted to make a run in some type of wild trade, they do have draft capital now with their first round picks that they do have control over that they could send out. By no means am I saying they should do that. I'm not saying that, but they do have that option now that they do have control over their picks. Lastly, they did get a trade exemption. And so I know that that's not necessarily a big deal at all, but still, they do have a $26 million trade exemption that they do have and that they can use. I think that they still have some time on that if they want to utilize that. And so that's just something that maybe they do if they're looking to make another move, heading into the offseason. So, with that being said, I think that those are really the maybe three positives out of here. I think that you go ahead, you've gotten those things done. You've now, I think, maybe picked more of a path to get, I think, a little bit more youth on your roster. And I think it really steers you away a little bit more from the old team that you had, because now you traded off Alex Caruso, you traded off Zach LaVine, you traded off DeMar DeRozan, and so they're gone. And so you're moving a little bit closer to a newer version of your team. And so next up, let's go ahead and let's jump into really now, what are we seeing as far as just this roster construction and where do we really go from there? Because I think that is probably a situation where we really wonder, because I was expecting that maybe they were going to go ahead, maybe flip Kevin Huerter, maybe a Zach Collins or Trey Jones, one of those, at least two of those three players, but that didn't happen. And so now you're in a situation where you have, 9 to 10 players that you're looking to maybe go ahead and build with, because AK did say that, he thinks that there's a couple ways to really build a championship team. That being you either have 9 or 10 solid guys, or you have a couple superstars and then you have some role players, which I think that is probably really the traditional way to do it. You get some franchise players or a franchise player, and then you build around them that way. But, I do understand he's wanting to really shape out a roster. You want to see what you have. You want some players that certainly can contribute at a high level. And so with that being said, with this roster construction, when we look at it, you you got 12 players that, at least have had 3 years of experience. You got 9 players that are listed as a point guard or a 2 guard. I mean, that's just listed at that, who knows what the true position is. But, you got Lonzo, you got Coby, you got Josh Giddey, you got Ayo, you got Trey Mann, you got THT, Dalen Terry, Javon Carter, Kevin Huerter now. And so, look, that roster construction is super awkward, and it just makes me wonder what exactly are we doing here? Because when we look at AK, we look at what he had to say, and just really talking about the fact that, look, he is saying, like, we have so many young players, but those young players have 6, 5, 4 years under their belt. They're pretty experienced players, and he's saying, I would like to stay away from the word rebuild. And so that's where this quote is coming from. This just actually happened where he was talking to K.C. Johnson and talking about, just the direction of the franchise, and he feels like it's more of a transition. But key here, he's thinking that the young players that he has with the 6, 5, 4 years under their belt really kind of keeps this team away from a rebuild, so to speak, as far as that status. And, even though you do have those players that have some experience, I kind of venture away from that and saying that, hey, it's not necessarily a rebuild. I think that you are still in a rebuild personally, in my opinion, but who knows? It's up for debate. But anyhow, so you're in this situation where I think you have an awkward roster construction. You have a lot of guards. You have players that you say are experienced. But I think now you really got to see what is going to be the future, I think, moving forward for this team. Because I think at this point, you have got to figure out, like, what are you going to do with these players? Because I think if you're talking about this 30 games, you're talking about maximizing this, it has to come down to player evaluation now. I think that you have no excuse now that Zach LaVine is gone. I think the writing is on the wall with Vooch. And I think it's all about now. You got to figure out who is going to be here and who is not going to be here. And if you're trying to build a contender, that means that, yes, you're going to have some of these players that stay, but you're also going to have to get rid of some of these players. You cannot continue to hold on to all these guards. Like, you seriously have to get this roster shaped in the right direction. One of the things that K.C. Johnson said going into this trade deadline that we are, I guess, coming out of it, when we didn't see anything happen with Vooch, is that there will be plenty of groundwork in the offseason for this team. And so I guess we're going to find out about that. And that makes me really wonder what these groundworks, really could be for this team. Because when we're talking about groundwork and you're talking about laying this foundation down, that leads me to believe that maybe there is a big trade to come. And if there is a big trade to come, I would think that it's probably going to impact, some of these younger players. I think that, if they have something that they didn't want to go ahead and make a trade, then do you have something that you are thinking about packaging up that could maybe get you more than what you could have got going into the trade deadline? I think that that's a very real possibility. And this is where it gets interesting, right? Because you're seeing right now, you see Julian Phillips, you see Ayo, you see Jalen Smith as well. And could one of those players be packaged up in a bigger deal to get you some significant draft capital back? I think that that's where it becomes interesting. And that's why if you're in this situation right now, when you talk about evaluating players, and we've said that several times so far in the video, this is super, super important, because if you're going to package up one of these players and you're essentially saying, okay, they're not going to fit into my long-term build, you had better know exactly that is the decision that you're going with. And it makes a lot of sense, because I think it would just be terrible to see one of these players packaged up. You get maybe the draft capital you're looking for, and then that player takes off, and then eventually, whatever pick you eventually end up getting, it doesn't pan out. And the thing with Ayo and Coby White, which are players that I think continue have been in the trade talks and things like that, especially when it came down to Ayo and Coby, like, we know that they have a situation coming up where they have that extension. And it's like, with that extension, I'm just kind of thinking, like, do the Bulls, have they really thought about the fact that with that extension coming up, are they getting ahead of this? Are you thinking that, look, we have got to do something before we get there? Are we thinking that we're going to keep one of the other? I mean, personally, I would like to keep both of them, but I just kind of get the feeling that when you have calls about Coby White, I wonder how serious those conversations were. How serious is AK maybe as far as seriously making a drastic move here in the offseason, as he keeps saying that he has some groundwork here? You know, could one of these players be in a package deal to kind of really get some draft capital there? I think that that is something to really look for, which leads me to the last part of the video and what we should be looking for, I think, from this team just down the last stretch of the season. I think it starts with, again, it starts first of all for me with just evaluating these players and seeing what you have. But I think a player like Buzelis has got to play some more. I think that he's showing you that he can definitely be a rim protector. We saw the other night he had 3 blocked shots. I know he didn't not miss a shot, but still he's showing me more in his offensive bag. He's not just standing in the corner. He's getting to the basket. He's knocking down 3-point shots. He's blocking shots. I know that really, you know, the sky is the limit for him, but it comes down to getting playing time. And when you talk about this roster construction, and I kind of threw up the roster there in a second ago, but there's other questions besides, you know, what we saw there with the guard position. Because if you think about it, look, you still have players like EJ Liddell on the roster. You still got players like Adama Sanogo on the roster, and it's like, are they in your plans? Are they part of your bigger fit? Like, what are we doing to kind of move on from that? We know that getting some more size, some more length, some more wings is going to be a priority. So I think that that is something that has to be in the evaluation period as well. So anyway, let me know in the comments here. Do you think that, yes, down the stretch, the Bulls need to play some more Buzelis, some of these players that I listed, to really see what they have, to see how they're going to move on, how they're going to shape this roster? Because I'm like, ultimately, if you're going to give the bag to, Josh Giddey, and you want him to be, maybe a foundational piece, there's certain pieces around him that you need to have that are going to really have to make this work. And with Buzelis, what I love most about him is just the identity that I think he's going to bring to this team. I'm not saying that he's a Joakim Noah type of player, but I'd have to think that if Joakim Noah were on this team, him and Buzelis would probably get along just fine. And I think that that is what the Bulls need. They need more players that have this type of edge. And that would suggest, look, if you can't find it with this current roster, then you had better get more draft capital to go out there and find those type of players and hopefully get you a franchise player that moves you not from just being a play-in team, not from just being a playoff team, but to being a contender again. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. I just want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest. We try to reach our humble subscriber goal at the end of the season. So make sure, like Buzelis is doing, you're slam dunking on that subscriber button for us. And so anyway, let me know what you're thinking. I think that we still have some more questions with what, this front office is going to do, how this team is going to look. But I will say this, I think the plan, you have got to make sure that you evaluate these players. You got to make sure you got to understand what your next pivot is. You do not want to go into this thing just unsure about players. And so I think we need to see some more of these younger players. Billy Donovan has no excuses not to play these players. You don't have any pressure on the pick or whatever that is. You got to make sure you know what you are really trying to build with here. So anyway, let me know in the comments. And as I always say, go Bulls. I will see you in the next one. All right, peace.